I'm alive. I'm alive. Sweet, well that saves me a trip.
To say that Tomb Raider 1 was a huge commercial success would be a complete understatement. It took the industry and the world completely by storm and instantly propelled Lara Croft into the realms of superstardom, the likes of which had never been seen before for a video game character. Keeping in mind that Lara was a fictional character in an industry where its most recognizable figures were a blue hedgehog and an Italian plumber, so seeing the public and the media treat a video game character like they were not only a real person but a cultural icon was a really huge deal. She was on the cover of magazines, she appeared in TV commercials, and several companies wanted her to be their brand representative. Professional models were also hired to portray Lara at various promotional events, trade shows, and photo shoots, with the first being Natalie Cook in 1997. Sadly, Shelley Blond couldn't reprise her role as Lara due to other commitments, so Judith Gibbons was hired to take her place and would be the voice of Lara up until Tomb Raider 3. This was also the start of Lara becoming gaming's pin-up girl, however, which didn't sit right with her creator Toby Gard, who promptly left core design altogether and wouldn't work on another Tomb Raider game until the Legend series in 2006, which we'll get to at a later date.
So of course, to capitalise on the sudden and instant success of its predecessor, core design were immediately commissioned by Eidos to make another game, and with double the manpower, and only a year later they gave us Tomb Raider 2 for the PlayStation 1. And this game does not fuck about.
I'll get into why I say that later, but right now I just wanted to focus on some of the many improvements and changes they made to the series because there are a lot of things here that I really like. For example, Lara no longer looks so polygonal and actually has some curves to her like a real person would. Her hairstyle got upgraded with the ponytail so she matched her FMV counterpart, and her moveset expanded with a few more moves that made her easier to control and gave players more options to navigate through the levels with. Now you had the ability to quick turn both in mid-air and underwater, which solved some of the issues that Tomb Raider 1 had. On top of that, her arsenal got an upgrade from 4 total weapons to 7. The levels got longer and more complex, and we also got given a couple of vehicles to drive around in. Additionally, because of the game's engine being upgraded to include dynamic lighting techniques, flares were introduced to the series here as well, which allowed you to add your own light source at any time with a simple press of the select button, and they could also be used while climbing and swimming.
Tomb Raider 2 is very much a sequel that embodies the bigger is better approach. It takes everything that made the first game great, and then hopes that by making it bigger, it's going to by extension make it better. Only the question here is, did they succeed?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. As for everything this game does better than the first one, there are also quite a few things that make this game inferior to it as well.
But first, let's start by taking a visit once again to Croft Manor.
Oh, awesome, we're starting outside this time, that's pretty neat. And there's an assault course here too, blimey. I'm really looking forward to exploring this area in a bit more detail. Wait, who the hell are you? Ah yes, how could I forget? This is the first game that introduced Lara's faithful butler Winston to the series. A man so unflinchingly committed to his job that he will follow you virtually everywhere you go at any time. Really? Really? Slowly. Of course, this means you can lose him easily enough, but that didn't stop him from just popping up completely out of nowhere and scaring the crap out of you. Like, there will be times where you go into a room that's completely empty, only to turn around and find that he stood right in front of you. Or perhaps you go for a wander around the giant maze, turn a corner, and then suddenly, oh! Jesus, would you stop doing that? So naturally you do what everyone did, which is lead him into the walk-in freezer and shut the door behind him to stop him from escaping.
Some nights I can still hear the screams.
Now that you're free from the flatulent tyranny of Winston, you're free to explore the rest of the mansion. There's much more to explore here than there was before, as not only do you have a fully explorable outdoor area complete with hedge maze and assault course, you also have some more rooms to explore on the inside as well. New rooms include a kitchen, a bedroom, an ensuite bathroom, and the loft. Existing rooms from before, like the main hall, the upstairs rooms, and the ballroom, have all had complete makeovers. There's even a secret room under the stairs that you can enter if you find the hidden switch in the maze outside and manage to run back through the door before it closes. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot you can do down here except look at Lara's collection of treasure chests and large piles of dirt through the windows. Actually, I'm not sure that's dirt. Let me just get another flare out and take a closer look. Hold on. Wait, that's treasure? Holy crap! I genuinely thought for years that these were giant piles of dirt on either side, but no, it's actually piles of treasure. I guess the resolution in those days was so low that the detail just got kind of muddled and lost, you know? It's like Lara's basement is the Cave of Wonders from Aladdin. Oh, damn it, just hang on a second, guys. Just let me get another flare out. Hang on. Fucking flares always such a pain in the ass. Ah! Jesus Christ, Winston, you scared the shit out of me. How the hell did you escape anyway? Come on. Back into the freezer with you. You flatulent old bastard.
Well, now all that fun and excitement is finished, let's go check out the actual game now, shall we?
The first thing we see is a battle taking place by the Great Wall of China. One force seems to have the upper hand with the help of a giant Chinese dragon, but a soldier from the opposing force manages to sneak under it and pull out a giant dagger from its belly, causing it to instantly die. The dagger is then sealed away by a group of monks so no one else can take it and never use its power again.
You know, for as basic as this game's plot setup is, you've got to give them credit for effectively getting this across.
Right away, you notice that the cinematic quality of these cutscenes is way better than the original, and certainly more atmospheric than before. This scene in particular, where the monk puts the dagger back and gets trapped, is actually pretty creepy in all honesty, and it does a great job of getting across that this dagger really isn't something that should be messed around with.
Of course, Lara, being the giant kleptomaniac that she is, she wants to add the dagger to her own collection, but obviously this isn't going to go as simply as she thinks, and soon she gets tangled up in a race against time with an Italian cult, whose leader wants to use the dagger to become a god.
The first level is set in the Great Wall of China, where Lara begins her search for the legendary dagger of Xian. And right out the gate, the game just lets you know that this time, it's really not messing around with you. Just for comparison, the first level of Tomb Raider 1 had traps and enemies to deal with, but they were few and far between to allow players time to get used to the game's controls, and then gently upped the challenge level by level to offer a nice difficulty curve. And now here's Tomb Raider 2's difficulty curve. Here, Tomb Raider 2's first level is difficult right from the get-go and has clearly been designed for people who have already played the last game and know what to expect. If you happen to be a newcomer to the series, this was a brutal starting point, as this game starts hard and only gets harder from here on. Traps are everywhere in this level, and these traps are the kind most games normally would reserve for their mid to later levels. But here they're just throwing everything at you and expecting you to know how to react to them, which will lead to you dying a lot, and possibly turning off your console out of frustration or hurling it out the fucking window. That doesn't mean this is a badly designed level, however. It's just a significant step up and challenge than before, and it can catch you off guard if you're not careful. You have your usual wild animals to fight, which in this case is a few tigers and some spiders, but after you reach the midway point, that is where it starts to get completely insane.
And if you didn't know what was coming, man, were you in for a shock.
First, you have to wade through a flooded corridor with walls that throw circular saws at you from all directions, that I swear to God I can never avoid no matter how hard I try. Then you get thrown into a room with 2 rolling boulders that you have to run away from Indiana Jones style, and then immediately jump over a spike pit and fall down a hole. Then once you've escaped that, you fall into a room where there are walls that have spikes on that start to move in, and you have to get out of the room in time before they crush you to death. And then after that, you have to sprint through a gauntlet of swinging blades whilst also avoiding falling into more spike pits, and also avoid getting gored by more walls of moving spikes.
I mean, good lord, that's just the first level, and already I've been faced with obstacles that I didn't even see in Tomb Raider 1. This game has the biggest, hairiest balls I have ever seen.
You may have also seen health, ammo, and even a secret item placed on the floor in this area too. Well, that's just yet another length this game goes to completely troll you. You have to have pre-existing knowledge of this level and perfect timing in order to pick these items up and still make it out alive, because even if you are slightly less than perfect with your movements, you will die.
But there is a silver lining to all of this, and that is, they fixed the save system.
Yes, that god-awful, super punishing save crystal system from the first game has been swapped out completely for a save anywhere system like in the PC port, and I am so happy to see this change. Now, instead of being forced to save once at certain locations, you can now pause the game at any time to save at any location. Of course, this wasn't perfect, as if you weren't careful enough, you could potentially save yourself into an unwinnable situation with no backup, but that's a small price to pay in my opinion for the option to quick save as many times as you want and whenever you want wanted. Anyways, after that you come to a zip wire that you use to sail across the ravine and end up in the final room of the level. But if you look over the ledge, you'll notice that there's a hidden area with a ladder that you can use to climb down to the bottom of the ravine.
I'm betting that not a lot of you will have a clue at what's waiting for you at the bottom of that ravine, because when researching this game, it was the first time that I'd actually played it before, and I was not prepared for what happened to me next.
You fight a T-Rex in China! China! At least with the level in Peru, it was semi-believable to a degree, as it was in an environment that kind of made sense. Here it's just physically impossible for this thing to be here. And no, I'm not just talking about in a time period sense. There is physically no way this thing could have gotten down here unless it somehow squeezed itself down the hole where I just came from, or it just tripped and fell off the top of the ledge and somehow didn't die from the fall. Okay, well I took care of that. Guess I better go check to see what it was actually guarding down here and pick it up. Hey, a grenade launcher, not bad. And it came with a bunch of ammo for it. Nice. Okay, time to head back and finish level. Ah! You've got to be kidding me. 2? Where did this one come from?
That right there sums up Tomb Raider 2 perfectly. It's not content enough to just take the first game's most iconic enemy and drop him in the first level of this one as a secret, but it decides to drop 2 in there just to fuck with you!
After all that, you arrive at the entrance to the resting place of the dagger seen in the cutscene earlier, only to be then attacked by an Italian assassin who tells Lara he's working for a cult leader called Marco Bartoli.
Marco Bartoli!
And that the door will only open at a certain time and only to someone who is worthy. He then kills himself by drinking a bottle of Steven Seagal's lightning bolt. A nearby laptop from the 90s allows Lara to track down the location of Marco Bartoli's hideout in Venice, and immediately she goes there to find out what it is they're actually up to.
And remember when I briefly mentioned in the last video about how annoying Pierre was to fight and how every single enemy with guns were the worst ones to fight because of their hit scanning attacks and how they were impossible to dodge? Well, I hope you're ready for more of that, because about 75% of the enemies in this game have guns.
I'm not even exaggerating with that statistic either. Each of Tabov Bartoli's goons either carry around shotguns, pistols, SMGs, or even flamethrowers. And these guys can literally appear anywhere, often at times when you're not expecting them, and almost always at times when you're not able to fight back because you're either climbing, diving, or in the middle of something else and can't pull out your weapons in time. Usually they're placed in high locations like balconies or at the tops of ledges or tucked away in places that you can't see, and they're almost always guaranteed to spot you before you even notice them, and can take a huge chunk of health off you in a matter of seconds. Just take this guy right here at the beginning of the Venice level, for example, who's not only right up on a balcony, but is placed in such a way that you won't even notice he is there until he starts taking shots at you, which will always land no matter what. So most of the time you just gotta take the hits whilst you turn around, slowly, draw your weapons, and then try to find the guy so you can fight back, but by then you would have lost almost a quarter of your health doing so, if not more.
Now, I know what you're thinking right now, and yes, of course enemies with guns are supposed to be harder to kill than ones without, that's a no-brainer, but the problem here is that you can't manually aim your shots and have to let the game do it for you, meaning that there are several times where they can see you, you can see them, but the game can't see them and won't let you shoot back. Which is really fucking frustrating.
But then there are these Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch looking motherfuckers who carry around these baseball bats and employ the brilliant tactic of ominously walking towards you like Jason Voorhees. And when they realise you know, have guns, they suddenly remember that bullets are bad and start to run around the place to try and avoid them. Which of course doesn't work. Big shocker. So yeah, the AI in this game isn't too bright, and all of the enemies in this game have the self-preservation skills of a turkey at Thanksgiving, but hey, at least some of them do drop health and ammo packs for you when they die. That's something. It's almost like the developers realised they overdid it with the gun enemies and did this as a way to balance it all out, and good job too, otherwise this game would be fucking impossible. But even that isn't perfect, because health kits are super scarce when compared to the previous game, and often when you collect ammo from enemies it will only give you a tiny amount, like say a box of shotgun shells can either give you 1 shell or 3 shells. And more often than not when you collect a medikit from an enemy, you'll have to end up using it straight afterwards anyway, because that enemy no doubt would have taken off half of your bloody health.
Okay, this is a bit of a nitpick, I'll give you that, but why is it sometimes that you can go to pick up a box of ammunition that shows itself to be full, and sometimes even overflowing with ammunition, and it'll only give you a couple of bullets?
Tomb Raider 2 was the first time core design started experimenting with using more urban environments, and the Venice level in particular ups the ante even further by introducing the franchise's first usable vehicle. Aside from being a faster way to get around, the boats also serve a double purpose by being essential tools to solving the level's puzzles. Here, for instance, you have a clear view of the level's exit, but the way to it is blocked by some water mines, and the switch to open it is on the other side of the map and on a short timer. So you can't just swim past them because the door will close. So instead you're expected to use your current boat to clear the mines and then find another boat nearby that you can use to race from the switch to the exit.
It seems like a completely throwaway moment, but this sequence of events here just shows how much Tomb Raider has evolved since the first game. Now every item, object and even vehicle can be used to solve the game's puzzles, and it opens up the door to a whole new load of possibilities for environmental interaction.
From here on out, the game ditches the ancient tomb settings for a more urban industrial one, and it's not until the later levels in Tibet and China where the game returns to actual tombs. But that doesn't mean they've skimped on the traps. Oh no, they're here alright and in full force. Apparently, Macho Broccoli gives zero fucks on employee health and safety because his hideout is an absolute death trap. Eventually you find a detonator that you use to blow up half a building, for some reason, and then you make your way to the last level of Venice, which is the abandoned opera house. Here you have swinging crates, falling sandbags, and broken glass that behaves the same as the spike traps do and can kill you instantly unless you walk through them, which is a little strange considering their size, but whatever. Perhaps even stranger are the inclusion of boulder traps that are placed in locations here that don't really make much sense within the context of the environment. The best example of this I can think of is when you're at ground level on the main room of this level and there are no traps at all to be seen anywhere, and you think it's safe to let your guard down only to then suddenly have two boulders chasing after you seemingly out of nowhere.
Obviously they put these here to keep the player on their toes and to not let them get too comfortable, but here it just seems like they couldn't bear the thought of the player not being attacked by something and just threw them in there for the hell of it.
In the last room of the opera house you fight some super roided up mini-boss who uses two of the longest barreled revolvers I think I've ever seen in fiction since Jack Nicholson's The Joker. He may seem tough, but let's see how he fares against a grenade straight into his face. Yippee-ki-yay, mother... Oh my god! I was not expecting that at all. That has got to be the most hilariously casual display of over-the-top violence I think I have ever seen in a PlayStation 1 game. She just blew apart a human being and she doesn't even so much as flinch.
Lara Croft, man, say what you want about her marketing back then, but at least she wasn't afraid to blast a motherfucker if they crossed her.
After that, you stow away on a seaplane to finish the level, and then we get an expositional cutscene between two horrible voice actors, who just so happen to be talking about their organization's evil plan, right when Lara so happens to be within earshot.
Believe me, but it's not quite the same now, is it?
Someday you will get a speeding ticket for that tongue, Fabio.
Hey, it's just a gut feeling that maybe you are wrong to look there.
Is your belief so fragile?
Of course, Lara forgets to do a sweep of the rest of the plane, so she gets snuck up on by this guy here who knocks her ass out with a wrench. The plane lands in an offshore rig, and she later wakes up to find that not only has she had all of her gear taken away, but that she's also been locked up in a cell. A cell, by the way, that has gaps between the bars so wide that Lara could easily fit through them without even trying, but you know, video games. Thankfully, bathroom sparkly goons are dense enough to imprison the world-renowned and resourceful Lara Croft in the same room where the button to open the cell door is, so it's not long before she's able to let herself out, find her pistols again, and then go on a revenge-fueled killing spree throughout the rest of the facility.
But you know how people always say that every game has a sewer level and it's the worst level of the game? Well, this section here feels like one giant, long sewer level.
Long, tight corridors that really don't do the controls any favours, lots of swimming sections full of sharks and those goddamn scuba divers, lots of awkward and annoying jumps, tedious amounts of backtracking, more enemies placed in awkward locations, and a ladder that's like the long one from Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, only Lara makes an annoying grunting noise every few seconds. Also, quick side note, this room here, worst room in the game. I won't go into too much detail as to why, but when you have to navigate a walkway suspended above a giant pool that if you mess up and fall off, you have to slowly swim around and find the nearest ladder, whilst dodging harpoon-firing scuba divers, climb said ladder, and then try again, it starts to get very annoying very quickly. Eventually you come to a room where you see a couple of Bartoli's goons beating up an Asian stereotype. After killing the goons, you find out that this man is a monk from Tibet, whose ancestor sunk Bartoli's father's ship, the Maria Doria, after he stole a sacred artifact called the Serath from their monastery in Tibet.
But you are my guide. My path bitter to a next incarnation. I have done my time here, haven't I?
During all of this, Lara is getting changed off camera into a skin-tight wetsuit, that one's for you, male teenage audience, and Charles Barkley shows up to shoot the monk before he can escape. Lara manages to dive out of the way of Bartoli's gunfire and chase after the submarine that's headed to the ocean floor to the sunken remains of the Maria Doria.
And I'm gonna be honest with you here, I really don't like these levels, like... a lot.
Check out the big hairy balls on this game as well by just dropping the player underwater with no sense of direction and expecting them to be able to just work out where they need to go in time before they drown. Quickly afterwards, you start exploring the various sections of the ship, which of course are full of Bartoli's goons and yet more scuba divers. But it's not until the third level that you start to realise that this is going to take a lot longer than you expected.
This section only lasts for 4 levels, but when combined with the last 2 levels from the rig, it somehow manages to drag the pacing of the game to a complete crawl.
The last level of this section takes place on the deck of the ship, and this level just flat out sucks. If I were to name a particular part that was the worst thing about this level, it would be this section here, where you have to drop from a hole in the ceiling onto a small dinghy to grab a key. Only it's designed in such a way that you have to have full health in order to survive the fall and not die from it. Thankfully they placed a large med kit by the hole just in case, but there's always a chance that you can still completely miss this and fall to your death.
I honestly can't decide if this is bad level design or just complete trolling on the developer's part. Or maybe both.
Finally, you find the right key and unlock the room containing the Seraph, which is surprisingly underwhelming, and then Lara resurfaces, gets changed, and steals the seaplane to travel to the monastery in Tibet. The plane runs out of fuel and crashes, and Lara has to hoof it on foot to the monastery. On the way, she breaks through a wall of ice like the Kool-Aid Man and commandeers the game's second vehicle, the Skidoo. And the music that accompanies this vehicle section? Incredible. It's like an orchestra in a 90s rave had a baby and this was their child. Of course, this thing controls about as well as the boat does, and there's far more room for error and more chances to court death. But who cares about that when you can hilariously run people and animals over Austin Powers style? What's funnier is something I discovered completely by accident when playing this game. I parked up to go get a secret on this ledge here, only to get back on my vehicle and have this snow leopard just casually walk up to me and then just instantly die like I had the touch of death or something.
God, the AI in this game is fucking stupid.
Eventually you arrive at Barkhang Monastery where the Seraph was taken from, and right away you see Bartoli's men fighting with the monks. Oh, sorry, did I say monks? Sorry, I meant seagulls in human form.
Can someone please explain to me why these monks are making these noises? Because I've been to an Asian country, and not once did I turn around to see monks squatting around in circles, making squawking noises like someone buggering an albatross.
What's perhaps more annoying is that you're not supposed to kill the monks, but kill the Italians. However, when you draw your weapons, more often than not, Lara will aim at the first thing she sees, causing you to shoot them by accident, instantly turning not just that monk you shot, but all of the monks in the level hostile towards you. Often it's actually better to just leave them to it and let them kill each other, and surprisingly the monks can actually handle themselves pretty well for people that are just wielding wooden spears against people with body armor and assault rifles. Check out the balls on this dude here who just straight up charges in like Galahad and takes them on single-handedly. After you return the Seraph to its original place, you make your way further into the mountain where you encounter several angry Yetis, yet more boulders, and some ancient Tibetan bouncy pads.
What, you mean to tell me you didn't learn about Tibetan bouncy pads in your history class? Just wait until you read about the great Aztec rubber ducky slip and slide. That shit will blow your mind.
After single-handedly reducing the population of snow leopards and yetis, you arrive at the chamber of Talion and find the artifact used to open the door from the first level back in China. Of course, it's not as simple as walking up to it and picking it up, as you first have to ring a giant gong, then defeat its guardian. a guardian who is a giant swole bird person. I mean, okay, I know it's supposed to be a Garuda, a scary creature from actual real-world Hindu and Buddhist mythology, but it just looks kinda silly. I think it's because it's a combination of how this thing walks and how hench it looks. It just looks like a stumpy little Ralph Wiggum in a bird mask. So you beat him, have a quick car chase with Bartoli's men, and then take the Talion all the way back to the Great Wall of China, then use that to open the door from the end of the first level. From here on out, the game goes full speed and throws practically everything it has at you in order to stop you from finishing it. The Temple of Xian is perhaps one of the more challenging levels in the game, especially from a platforming perspective, and it's certainly one of the more interesting levels from a design perspective. It's got lots of that classic Tomb Raider charm, with lava pits, grand structures, and over-the-top traps, but it also ups the ante further by adding and combining elements from previous levels with totally new ones. It's a really challenging level, and quite a long one too that's sure to test even the most dedicated of players. But much like Tomb Raider 1, Tomb Raider 2's last couple of levels are really where it starts to get more interesting. After surviving the temple, you arrive just in time to see Bartoli stab himself in the heart with the dagger of Xian and get carried through to the next room by his goons. So you follow after him to stop the ritual from completing, but immediately end up in what I can only describe as the inside to Lo Pan's head.
I mean, okay, I wasn't expecting that.
Just look at the geometry of this place. Where the hell am I? And how did these guys manage to carry Bartoli through all of this and not drop him? I'm done. Honestly, I'm done. There is nothing that I can say at this stage that can accurately describe how unprepared I was for what you are seeing now. So let me get this straight. Not only do I have the Tomb Raider equivalent of Half-Life Zen to deal with, but I also have to watch out for low-flying green giants? What the actual fuck is going on here? And not only that, you have to be careful to not get too close to these guys because they will come to life and start attacking you, and they are a nightmare to deal with, especially in groups, and can sometimes kill you in one hit. Eventually, after taking a casual swim under a pool of lava and fighting more living statues, and of course Bartoli's elite knife chuckers, you end up at the main chamber where Bartoli has been laid to rest. But before you can reach the dagger in time to pull it out of him, he transforms into a Chinese dragon, which serves as the game's final boss. He's easy enough to beat as long as you keep your distance and remember to dodge his ranged attacks, and eventually he'll fall over and expose the dagger, allowing you to pull it out and finish him off for good. Of course, this causes the whole temple to start collapsing around you, and you make your escape through a door at the back of the room to eventually end up outside of the Great Wall of China again.
And you think that was it, right? Bartoli's dead, the world has been saved, and you've got a sweet-ass looking bread knife. But nope, you've still got one more level left before the game officially ends.
We're back at Croft Manor, where Lara is getting ready to have a well-earned rest when suddenly we hear something smash a window and set off the house alarm. Of course, it's Bartoli's goons again, who have all come straight to Lara's home with huge revenge bonus because you kinda, sorta killed their boss. Thankfully, though, she remembered to pack the key to her gun cupboard in her silk nightgown, so you're able to grab a shotgun and a fuck ton of ammo to go deal with them. Mercifully, this level is way easier than the last few, but it can still kick you in the ass if you're not careful. Oh, and sadly, there's no Winston here either, which is a shame. And no, he's not still locked in the freezer either. In fact, where is that flatulent old bastard anyway?
Typical. He's there when I don't need him, but when I do need him, he's nowhere to be found. Fucking butlers.
With that dealt with, the game then ends with Lara about to take a shower. But of course, before she actually gets naked, she turns to the camera and breaks the fourth wall by telling the player directly that they've seen enough and then shoots them.
And you know what, Lara? Yes. I have seen more than enough of this game.
Overall, Tomb Raider 2 is a bit of a mixed bag. While it does try a lot to improve and evolve the series, it doesn't always end up succeeding in doing so. The main offenders for me are the over-reliance on enemies with guns and the practically non-existent difficulty curve, as they do more to damage the replay value of this game than the outdated controls do. While having 7 guns to play with is nice, only the grenade launcher and the automatic pistols really felt useful, with the harpoon gun being extremely situational and almost impossible to aim and hit moving targets with, and the M16 just being too damn slow to aim and shoot anything. Tomb Raider was already a game with an element of trial and error to it, but here it feels like the player had to have had pre-existing knowledge of the level's layout to avoid dying instantly from some of the quite frankly brutal traps. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for a game with a good challenge, but the way some of these traps are laid out just make it seem that they were put here simply to make the player's life more difficult and not as a way to enhance the level. There are some great looking locations in this game, such as Venice, Tibet, in China that all feel great to explore and are really memorable. But locations such as the Rig and the Maria Doria go on for far longer than they really needed to, and ultimately kill the pacing of an otherwise pretty steady moving game. Does this mean that I think Tomb Raider 2 is a bad game? Not at all. In fact, far from it. I just think that they tried a bit too hard to do too many new things and ended up with only some of them paying off. It's still definitely worth checking out if you're into the series, but ultimately I'd say that the original is still the better game in my opinion.
Tomb Raider 2 was praised by critics at the time for adding more challenge and polish to the series, and it quickly outsold its predecessor to a grand total of 8 million copies sold worldwide to date. And of course, everyone was anticipating what Lara's next adventure would be, but thankfully for them, they wouldn't have to wait long to find out. Oh, Winston! Be a dear, would you, and fetch my copy of Tomb Raider 3 from the archives? This might take a while.